So the iPhone 16 and iPhone 16 Pro are here, and with it come a few really significant camera changes. So I thought we would really put this new camera to the test. I phoned up my friend Callum, who has officially the biggest camera that I know, and we went to put this iPhone to the test.
We are going to kick off with the telephoto because this is actually the first year that the iPhone 16 Pro gets the 5x telephoto. So we'll give this a comparison. The direct comparison that we have is on the right hand side, the Komodo with a 90mm prime. So unfortunately I don't have a like for like, but because it's a 6K image, I've digitally cropped just a little bit in, and then we get roughly a similar-ish type of image here. So here's just a kind of a static, give you guys an idea. I think there's a pretty significant difference in fall off, like the image fall off. You can see that the even the kind of the shallow depth of field on the pier in the background is just a lot softer. Here's an image of me. A pretty challenging situation for this one because obviously the sun was directly behind me, so you can see that the Komodo is a bit brighter in the background. One of the advantages of a cinema camera is you can change this in post, so I could really dim that down because I can actually change the ISO afterwards because it's recording in RAW. But the biggest difference here obviously is the depth of field in the background. You can actually clearly see the pier in the background on the iPhone shot, whereas on the Komodo it's just much softer. One more on the telephoto. Again, I think these are fairly tricky situations because it's so bright out today. But I actually think the iPhone actually handled this one a little bit better. I think you're going to get that sometimes when exposure is handled almost like computationally by cameras, is like because obviously there's no operator kind of error that can occur really. But yeah, I think the telephotos actually start really well.
So obviously one of the main advantages with modern smartphone cameras is of course the stabilization. So right now I've got Callum filming me, as you can see, like this, and one of the main ways that you actually stop camera shake on a bigger camera system is literally through weight. So you add weight to the camera. You can see that Callum has a pretty large rig, if I don't say so myself. Very large. So obviously the advantage of that is the extra weight added to the camera reduces camera shake. So I'm just going to kind of walk around and kind of just follow me. I know that the focus might be a little bit of a challenge, but we're going to see the difference between the two levels of stabilization. So I've got the iPhone here, and afterwards I'll give Callum the iPhone and kind of be able to compare side by side. But you can literally see, I'm sure, the differences side by side between the two systems. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm sure the iPhone in this regard is a lot more stable, even if it does probably look a bit computational compared to the stabilization of a much more natural level of stabilization on a camera system, depending on how smooth Callum is. But he's looking pretty smooth right now. He's trying.
Okay, so obviously this is not an exact match of shots, but hopefully it does illustrate what I'm talking about. I'm actually also going to do two iPhone shots because this was recorded in the Blackmagic camera app. I will talk about that a little bit more detail just a little bit later. I do think that it uses different computational kind of algorithms for things like stabilization. So I'm going to throw in a cinematic mode shot, which actually does a better job of illustrate actually how aggressive the stabilization is on the iPhone when you shoot in the almost like the default modes. Here we have that shot, and I think you'll probably agree with me. This is much more hovery. It's almost like a handheld gimbal. Obviously, you know, cinematic mode aside, but you can see that the shake on the right-hand side, the actual Komodo image, is much more natural. It's much more cinematic, for want of a better word. Really, the iPhone looks great. It's fantastically stable, and they do an insanely good job with stabilization on the iPhone, but it does look artificial. All right, so it is a new rear-facing sensor on the iPhone 16 Pro, so I think it's only fair to do some main rear-facing lens comparisons. We're not going to talk about ultra-wide today in this video because actually trying to find a lens on the Komodo is a bit of a challenge, but it's a beautiful 48 megapixel sensor. So again, we'll just go into sort of almost like some quick fire side by sides. This one is actually interesting because this is a clip that is actually out of the standard camera app. This was not an Apple log clip on the left hand side. It was simply the standard camera app shooting in 4K 25 frames a second, so hopefully give you a kind of a difference in terms of the grade. And it's just interesting straight away to see how much the iPhone wants to just balance the exposure here. You can see that the sea is almost the same color as the sky. So we'll do a couple more side by side. Something which I have found super interesting is that you can actually change the settings of the red footage after the fact. So this was a lot of this stuff is showing as overexposed initially, but then you can literally correct the ISO in editing software, which is pretty crazy, I have to admit. I do just want to give you guys a kind of a feel for what this red footage actually looks like in full picture. So we'll do some before and after, like full frame, so you can kind of see the difference. So obviously this is the iPhone, that is 60 frames a second footage, and then the frame rates are kind of interesting on the red, I have to admit. So you actually don't get a ton of high frame rate options. This one is at 40 frames a second. There was a bit of a ND color cast. It was a very, very bright day we were dealing with lots of kind of changing colors, but you can see that the right hand side of the frame of the Komodo is a little bit darker. That is because of the ND and not because of the camera itself, if that makes sense. But obviously you don't have that type of same issue. I think this shot is really illustrative here. You can just see the fall off and the level of fall off from the sensor size. That's obviously a combination between the sensor size and the lens that are used on the Komodo. This shot is really interesting because this is the first time this has happened to me with iPhone footage, or at least iPhone log footage. Seemingly, I think it's probably because I wasn't using full ProRes here. I was using one of the ProRes, I think it was ProRes LT or 1UP. And it's a bit of I think it just wasn't able to cope with the level of data in this shot. Whereas if you switch over to the Komodo here, you can actually see almost like this is still at 40 frames a second. And it is a closer crop, but you can see how much more detail is retained.
So, whilst we're talking about the brand new iPhone 16, it's obviously really important that you protect your new iPhone in the best way possible. So let's talk about the newest offering from Casetify. This is the Ultra Bounce case for iPhone 16 series. You can see that one of the key features is the protective corners. Most drops will occur on the corner of the device. You can actually see this in this footage here. You can clearly see when the phone is dropped, likely bouncing on a corner like it would be in real life. Your phone is just protected way better than it would normally be. Another exciting addition this year is called the Ultra Bounce Utility Lanyard. So we'll just loop this through here. As phone straps have got a lot more popular over the years, most people tend to connect their phone strap via like a little strip of plastic at the bottom or actually to the lightning port itself. That is obviously not super secure and not super safe. Whereas because the materials used in this case construction are so good and so strong, you get a natural carabiner clip and you can just see how strong this case actually is. Like, I'm really pulling there. You can of course use the full strap variation and actually use this almost like a shoulder strap, or you can use it as a wrist strap design as well, obviously around a city, having a lot more security from things like phone snatching. Casetify also offers different levels of protection based on your personal preference and what you need for your own device, such as the impact case or the bounce case line. These are slimmer but still very strong. If you're interested, you can check this out using the link down below in the description. It is casetify.com/TomRich, and you'll actually be able to snag 15% off your Casetify order. Thank you for Casetify for sponsoring this video. This actually wouldn't have been the best test or comparison until the inclusion of Apple Log. Last year's generation iPhones was such a massively significant upgrade for video creation on the iPhone that the inclusion of Apple Log basically means you actually can match your iPhone shots with cameras on a more professional level. So we'll use this shot here as a comparison. Previously, if I was to shoot this in the standard iPhone camera way, the exposure in the highlights would have been maintained. And you can just see on both devices here, we were shooting directly into the sun. You can actually see that the iPhone is actually behaving far more like a professional camera system. You can see on the Komodo as well, things are overexposed in the background to allow for the exposure to be even on my face. That is the way traditional cameras work, and the inclusion of Apple Log has actually allowed that type of thing to exist on the iPhone. I can't undersell quite how important Apple Log is on these phones, and it does basically mean that it actually does become a viable tool for professional filmmaking and videography. All of the video in this video was shot using the iPhone 16 Pro in that Apple Log format. I was using the Blackmagic camera app for all of this. It's a really, really good app. It lets you control the kind of level of ProRes compression that you go for, which is really handy just to stop you filling up your phone with literally about 1 minute of footage. One of the most significant changes this year is the inclusion of 120 frames a second at 4K. So previously, when we've been able to film at these high frame rates, you weren't able to do it in 4K. You'd have to max down to 1080p, which is obviously a little bit of a deal breaker. But again, combined with Apple Log, this actually becomes a really, really valuable tool. Like, again, let's look at this shot here. Because of the flexibility that Apple Log provides, you're able to to actually color grade this and end up with a really professional slow-mo looking shot. What's really interesting is that the Komodo, even though it costs literally 10 times the price of this iPhone, when you consider the full price of the rig, actually the iPhone has it significantly beat when it comes to things like higher frame rate options. So you literally can't film in 120 frames a second on the Komodo at 4K. You have to drop it to 1080p. So that's obviously an enormous win for the iPhone 16 Pro out of the box. But then it also applies a massive crop, like absolutely massive. And you can see this in this shot here. Woo-hoo-hoo! Oh, mate, he's nailed it! He's absolutely nailed it! You're lucky I was rolling on that one. I'm stood here, and to get the same frame from the level of crop from the Komodo, that is how far the camera is. She's absolutely crazy, but that is a 120 frames a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, 120 frames a second crop. And it crops in, do you even know the crop factor?
It's like, no, I actually don't know.
It's got to be like 5x or something.
Is it Super 16, is that a thing?
Yeah, maybe.
So here is that footage, and I think you'll all agree that I think the iPhone's very much got it beat here, to be honest, which is kind of interesting. Like, it's super noisy because of that crop factor. So far zoomed in, there's no really for that noise to go other than into the image. Let's look at some other examples. What's really interesting about these two examples is like the red Komodo is not designed for this frame rate. So it's clearly kind of like falling apart slightly. The noise is really prominent. I've crushed it a bit in this shot, but you can just clearly see it in this. But at the same time, there is something so filmic about this. You know, this could have been on TV 15 years ago and everyone would be like, yep, okay, you know, that makes sense. The shot is really gorgeous, and because of the compression level that you're essentially getting from the lens but also the crop factor, you're just not able to replicate this type of thing on the iPhone. So, you know, here's a similar thing. This is shot on the main rear facing lens because 120 has to be shot on the main rear facing lens, and you can just clearly see the difference. Like, it's nowhere near close, even though clinically the image is much better on the iPhone because there's less noise. And what's also very fun, because of the form factor and the stabilization, you can actually get just super creative shots that are actually very challenging to be able to get with a more traditional camera system. You'd probably need a gimbal to be able to pull this off well, and you'd obviously need a pretty wide lens to be able to achieve this on the Komodo. Like, here's a similar type example, but again, because of the crop factor, it was borderline impossible to get a similar style of shot. So yeah, here's one more example, and I think this is just kind of clear. You're clearly seeing what I mean. Like, the actual quality of shot on the Komodo isn't probably as good, but there's just something about this image which is just so much more kind of attractive than the comparative footage on the iPhone. It just doesn't hit in clearly the same way. And in fact, I asked Callum why people actually love the red image.
That's what red's all about, is the image from the camera. It obviously starts from a little cube, you build it out into this massive thing, but it's all to get the perfect image.
Something which has always struck me about this type of footage is it's not the sharpest, it's not the kind of most clinically accurate, but it is beautiful, right? Like an iPhone, like this is why we're filming on the iPhone 16 Pro today. The static standard video without the log is quite sharp. It's quite clinical. Yeah. Whereas that's almost like the polar opposite of these cameras, right? They're not going for sharpness.
Yeah, I think it's like the film look, right? The cinematic, as people say. I think dynamic range is a massive thing with this. So on a day like today, you've obviously got the bright sunlight, and then you've got the shadows area, kind of connects both. And then, because it also shoots RAW, you can then choose after which of those you're going to favor, whether it's the highlights or the shadow.
Of course, the iPhone has done really well throughout the course of this video. And I don't really want people to go away with the opinion that, like, oh, well, we don't need expensive cameras now because you can film in Apple log on these devices. That's not really what I want to get from this video. What I am just wanting to kind of get across is that these are actually a really useful and viable tool now. One of the main advantages with a professional camera system system is, of course, they have interchangeable lenses. So we've talked about this in the video. We had a 35mm and a 90mm for the Komodo, and the iPhone actually has more scope than that. You've got an ultra-wide lens, a main rear-facing, then a zoom all the way up to 120mm. But that is literally it. Everything else and within that zoom range is digital crops or digital zooms. And it basically just means that the iPhone is fixed. Those are the zooms you're kind of stuck with, and that's absolutely fine. But on the professional Komodo camera, or any professional camera, or even a mirrorless camera system or something cheaper, one of the main advantages is that you can literally put pretty much any lens on the front, and it will allow you to film at very high focal ranges or very, very small focal ranges. One of the very video-centric changes this year is Apple's new audio system in video that actually allows you to manipulate and change the audio of your footage directly after you've captured it, and it is actually really powerful. Let's actually try the new iPhone 16 Pro audio controls. So if you don't know, there are a whole bunch of new audio controls on these devices, and it basically allows you to process your audio after you film a video and essentially target the areas that you actually want to be included in your video. So speech, there's an in-frame option, there's an option for studio audio to actually allow you to sound like you're actually inside a recording studio. So jury's out. I'll have to kind of check back in with you guys when I have a chance to actually review this footage. We'll see what it sounds like. So there we have it. Of course, a bit of a silly comparison, but at the same time, I just genuinely find these videos very interesting. And also, with the inclusion of Apple Log, things just get a bit closer than they have done in previous years. So hopefully it inspires you to maybe go out and take the phone that you have just purchased and maybe go and shoot something because you are just interested, and you maybe realize there's certain focal ranges. Even a camera like the Komodo is not a gazillion miles away from this one.